Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Speed Tips by Bob and Chad. We just got through, of course, those of you IMCA people were probably all in Boone or watching the Super Nationals live or whatever the case was. What a week, man. 8 days. And then the extreme heat kind of took the toll on everybody at the beginning of the week, but they definitely had a lot of racing going on. What were your thoughts, Chad?
Yeah, it was an unbelievable week for us. We get to see all the people from all over the country. Most of them you only get to see them once a year, and it's at that show. And we really enjoy getting out there and helping the guys and working on their stuff. And we serviced a lot of pull bars and sliders, and it's always good to hang out, out there in Manufacturers Row with you and Uncle Pat and Ben and Kelly and Rex, and it's a fun week. It's a lot of work, and you're right. Them first 4 days were miserable. I mean, that was tough, but we all kind of pulled through there, and it was hard to believe that I think it only rained like 17 drops there on whatever night it was. I was like, oh man, we're gonna get drenched, and it was coming right for us, and then it just disintegrated. So IMCA is clearly wired right to the main office, so it was probably one of the most beautiful weeks we've ever had there since I've been going. So, but we had a good week. Everything went pretty smooth, and debuted some new products and got some new ideas from some racers for some more new products. So just it was a good long week. Now we're here thrashing, trying to figure out the Jamboree. We had a little adversity getting to Boone. We blew up our toter, and thankfully Trent Guest let us use his other rig, so got us there and got us through the week. So we can't thank him enough for taking care of us there and letting us get our trailer there and back. And now we're getting ready for the Jamboree at Deer Creek, so see what that brings.
Yep, that should be pretty cool. That should be a good time. What is that, 4 days?
Yeah, I think it's a Wednesday practice and Thursday, Friday, Saturday race.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, the 8 days of racing, I don't know. I'm not as young as I used to be. That 8 days straight kind of, I was thinking yesterday, I don't know what to think about that.
Yeah.
But it was good, like you said, to get to see all the people and see a lot of people that watch us on this show and talk to a lot of different people and a lot of racers and so you always enjoy that. That's pretty cool. You get to see a lot of racers and if you want to watch a lot of races, there's a lot of races to watch. No doubt about that.
It's truly amazing that they can run that many races and have it flow so good. And I mean, IMCA does such a great job. Everybody that runs that deal and works with everybody that works there is great for us, great to work with, and it's just an unbelievable event, for short track racing to have almost 1,100 cars in 8 days of racing. It's unbelievable. I know I had a couple employees that it was their first time, and they're blown away, you could say.
Yeah, it's unreal. I mean, like I said, it's totally amazing the job that those people do, and it's just you can't even comprehend it until you actually see it. I mean, it's just one of those deals you gotta be involved to be able to understand what it all takes, and it's pretty cool. Well, we got some questions up here. Brady says, what does changing the wheel offsets on the front of the car do? Well, what it does, of course, it makes the car wider in the front, which tends to make the car a little bit more stable. The other thing that it does is it changes your wheel rate. In other words, the wheel is further away from the spring. So say you have a 500-pound spring in there with a 3-inch offset, and then you put a 1-inch spacer on there, the car is going to think that you put a softer spring in there too, because you moved the wheel an inch further away from the spring. So it changes the actual wheel rate itself. We did that on a couple cars last weekend, moving the right front out even further than what we normally would, just to try to get a little bit better balance of the car. The way the racetrack was it was a little different than, or quite a bit different than what the normal weekly show would be there. And so, we were trying stuff, and it seemed to help the car. Like I said, it was quite a bit better. Larry, yeah, it was good to see you at the Super Nationals there. The racing Checkers or Wreckers to a whole new meaning last week. I can't disagree with you there. There's a couple of those stock car mains. Those boys were really getting serious now. I'm thinking, holy moly. But, oh well. Tim says 8 days felt like one long day. Yeah, it kind of actually did. Yeah, that is for sure. They just kind of ran together. I mean, it was definitely, there was a couple of, like Wednesday night was an extremely late night. I didn't make the whole night. I said to heck with it, come home and watch it on IMCA TV. That was the thing that's kind of nice about the fact that thing is on IMCA TV. And so I was still up just as late, but I was only 10 minutes away from bed. So it was a lot better than 30 minutes away from bed. So talk about your new products that you debuted, Chad.
Oh, I brought one with. The other ones are all in the trailer yet, but one of the ones we debuted was a tool for taking the bearings out of the suspension cages. So we've had this tool that we made for ourselves, probably 15 years ago, and then my guys kept telling me to release it to the world, and I guess it just took us a long time to do that, actually. Most of the time we just tell everybody to use a punch and knock it out, but we decided to make a cool billet tool like we use here when we take them in and out, so it slips down inside the housing and then captures the bearing, and then we made a little pounder that goes in there, so you can either put it in a press and push on them or pound them out. This pushes on the inner race, and you're changing them so they're wrecked anyway, so we don't care if you compromise them on the way out. It doesn't really matter since they're expired anyway. So and then you can push them in with our 461 tool, bearing and seal tool that grabs the outer race when you push them into the housings. So just expanding our cool tool line. We also debuted our slider cleaning kits there, which are just basically all the tools that we use here when we're cleaning them and building them and servicing them. We never really, you don't think of it until you have enough people coming to the trailer and asking for a cleaning kit. The parts that we use, if they bring a slider in and watch us use the brush and the pick and the tools that we use, they're like, well, why don't you offer that? You don't even think about how difficult some of them tools are to find, and it seems easy for us, but it's because we have the resources. So we put that together in a cool little kit with some Schaefer's grease. We switched all of our sliders now to Schaefer's products. So Tim does a great job with Schaefer's there, and we were using the Molly lube on the Torrington bearings all weekend. So the cleaning kit's pretty cool, and we put it in a Trace My Space foam insert for your toolbox. So just another cool tool to help service your sliders.
Awesome. Now, Daniel's got a leaf spring street stock. Thoughts on moving the right rear lowering block to increase anti-squat percentages? We always actually, like back years ago when we ran leaf springs, we actually ran less arch right rear with a lower block, and then we ran a 1-inch, like those days we ran the how 30s on the right side and how 31s on the left side, and then we had a 2-inch lowering block on the left side and a 1-inch lowering block on the right side to try to get more left rear grip. So, thoughts of moving the right rear lowering block to increase anti-squat percentages, it definitely will help you with that. There's no doubt about that. Zach, what should I adjust on my Midwest Modified for corner exit on a slick racetrack? The rear end wants to kick out. The biggest thing when the rear end wants to kick out, because of the steer factor, what actually is going on, I would highly recommend putting some lead in the car, lengthening my left side wheelbase. And anytime I see a car that the tail wants to kick out, there's two things. It's either got trail in it or it's got too much stagger. And so I would highly recommend adjusting the lead in it, because with the steer that we have in these cars, normally these cars are steering probably 2.5 to 3 inches. And so if you adjust a little lead out of it, you're just taking a little bit of dynamic steer out of it so that it straightens the car up a little better. Kelton wants to know, what's your opinion on tire pressure? We are trying to accomplish with that or not unbalance the car. Depending on what tire you're running, a lot of these tires, like the IMCA tire, is not made for low air pressure, and it actually doesn't work all that well on low air pressure. It'll create the car, it'll give the car some balance issues that are kind of a tire issue, and you can't necessarily control that because you don't know, the tire is just a big spring also. So when you take air pressure out of it, it makes that tire softer, and now you've kind of got a tire that's trying to do the same thing. But what happens is, with these DOT type tires that have the hard sidewall, it'll actually cave in the middle when it gets under inflated, and now you don't have a level surface on the. So in my opinion, like we always run with those IMCA type tires, we always run 15 to 16 pounds right side. Left rear is usually around 10, and the right or the left front's usually around 12. 10 to 12 is what with the IMCA tire. And I think the American Racer tire is very similar. You can get by with a little bit less air pressure with the American Racer, probably 1 pound to 2 pounds each. I'm not as familiar with the American Racer because we work more with the IMCA type stuff. Bob, have you tried negative stagger on a modified to tighten the car up on slick racetracks? No, I've never ever tried that. I always felt if you had to go to negative stagger, that would be a crutch to try to fix something that's not right in the car itself. Negative stagger, I know a lot of them hobby stocks and some of those guys, even some stock car guys do that, but I would think there would be better ways with a modified that you could adjust your suspension to compensate for it, because you still have to roll in a circle. And I would think with the negative stagger, you'd be trying to drag that right rear, which would cause issues, in my opinion. Zach, no, lengthening the left rear would make the wheelbase longer on the left side and shorten on the right side. If you lengthen the right rear, your tail out problem is going to be worse. Kenson, on a USRA GRT B mod, what's a good starting point for load numbers on the left front and the right front? Well, Kenson, I apologize. I don't actually have those load numbers, to be honest with you. At least I don't have them on the top of my head. I know we have them at the shop. And what I would probably do is just give Brandon a call at the shop tomorrow, and he can give you that information. I don't have it off the top of my head to be able to comfortably tell you the answer without making sure that I'm giving you the right answer. And all cars are different, even though they're, even though they're the same brand. It doesn't seem to make a lot of difference. The load numbers will still vary somewhat. So is there anybody special you got to see last week, Chad?
Oh man, there's so many people that it's like I said, it's so awesome to see everybody and get to work on their stuff and help them out. And I guess I can't really single out just one in particular, but
Vendor Row was pretty busy.
yeah,
There's
I
a
mean
lot of traffic up and down Vendor Row all week.
it gets pretty wild there from 10 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. I feel like it's out of control.
Yeah, I was pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. I was very impressed with the amount of people that came and went. We had these little keychains or tab openers. My daughter thought that'd be a great idea. And of course, I'm like, the hell would we want one of these for? And we had I think they'd made 2,000, and we were out of them by Wednesday.
Yeah, there's one guy that is probably going to get a talking to next year from about 4 of us. Every day he'd come through and get a handful of stickers,
the security guy. Yeah.
And then I had some guy say that he has them for sale at his garage sales in town there. So he's going to get a piece of my mind next year. So
yeah, I would agree with that, because he kind of did the same thing. We had Wednesday, we put pens out because that was the only thing I had left. And of course, he had to stop by and get a couple free pens.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jeff, what does pulling the pucks out of the BHE pull bar do? It allows it to get more movement. And there's certain racetracks, like on a real slow, slick racetrack, a little more movement's not a bad thing, because it just allows the tires to keep caught up. And what it does is it just help keep the tires in compliance to the racetrack when the racetrack's real slow and super slick. Some guys seem to think that helps the car, and I know every time we've done that, it seems like it's helped the car. Pulling a puck out will definitely help the car on real slick racetracks. It was pretty common, like last week, that we would run less pucks in the spring bar than what we would normally run on a normal racetrack, because there was just absolutely no grip in the racetrack. Don, what changes does BHE do to the GRT car? Actually, our front upper mounts are a little bit different. We have the A-frames in a little bit different location, and that's really about it anymore. Now, we've changed to a little bit different nose bar configuration. I don't know if they're going to do that or if they're going to stay with what they have. Really didn't ask them or talk to them. In fact, I didn't get to talk to the GRT guys as much last weekend as I'd like to have, because it just seemed like every time they were around, I was busy, and every time I wasn't busy, then they were busy, and I didn't really get much of a chance to talk to them. Are base valve shocks and sport mods possible? Are base valve shocks and sport mods possible and worth the money? Usually on a black slick racetrack. In my opinion, a base valve shock is the best shock you can have anytime on a real dry slick racetrack. The base valve product is very slick. It runs a lot less gas pressure, and you just don't have that rod force that you do on some of the other shocks that on a slick racetrack just helps a lot.
You missed one there.
I was thinking I might have. With a 412 shock on the right front, what's the best spring rate I should run? Well, the spring rate's really determined kind of on your chassis itself and where the roll center is. The shock basically just controls the timing movement of the spring. Normally on that shock, we run a 500. But it kind of, like I said, it depends on, we don't really change the spring in relationship to the shock. We actually usually change the shock in relationship to the spring. Last weekend we went a little softer on compression, just to try to get the car to roll to the right front a little bit faster, load the right front tire a little more, because like I said, the racetrack had virtually no grip, and so we had to do things that we would normally not do, just to get a little bit more grip. How much rear bite should I run on a dry slick racetrack on an IMCA stock? A quarter mile to 3/8 track. That's the rear bite deal is kind of a little bit of a driver preference. I still like to be in that 150 range. I think that's a good balance for those cars. Still gives you pretty good side bite on the right rear. If you get much more than the 150, when you get up into the 200s, you start losing side bite on the right rear tire. And then all of a sudden the right rear tire is not gripping, and you'll end up getting free getting in, and then it'll get a throttle push in the middle. And so it's not a very balanced setup. But some guys run that. I mean, some guys run more than that, but I've never found it to be super balanced. We've had the best luck with something around the 150 range. On a metric street stock, when track gets slick, would you stiffen or soften the right rear spring? And 11-inch or a 13-inch would be better. Well, I would definitely, I don't know. Some guys go real soft. The problem is when you go softer, you're actually creating roll, but you're not actually putting the load on the tire. So I've never been a big fan of a real soft right rear spring, because I think what happens is the car gets over there and rolls over. You're lifting up the left front. You're toting the left front, but you're not really loading the right rear enough to get the traction that you want. So I stay with a little stiffer spring, but the 11-inch will get your spring table to the point where the car's going to roll on there. I would say, I would be in that 225, 250 range with probably a 250 range with an 11-inch spring.
You got to go back to Allen. Factory 4-link street stock.
On a factory 4-link stock, when the car rolls over on the right rear, what bar angle do you want to fall under? You're going to want to get that right rear to the point where it's actually probably fallen to level or just a skosh below level. The left rear, if you could be in that 25 to 30 degrees would be ideal. You get much more than that. Those cars just, that suspension has a lot of steer characteristics to it. So you got to be a little careful. With too much angle can create too much steer. Okay. There's been talk about guys running 1,000-pound springs or higher in the left front of UMP style modifieds to help the car rotate on entry through the center. How do you feel about this idea? Well, the stiff left front actually will help the car tighten up, and it keeps more side bite in the right rear. If the car, if you're running a low spoiler where you don't have a lot of spoiler, and the UMP cars, they don't have much for spoiler, do they? I don't think they do.
Sure.
Anyway, what it does is it helps it rotate through the middle, but by rotating through the middle, it gives the right rear a bunch of side bite. It's pretty common, like last weekend, in a couple of the cars we were working with, we were running a softer left front spring to help the cars turn at the beginning of the week. And then as the racetrack become more wore out, we ended up having to stiffen that left front to keep the tail underneath it. You're just trying to keep some side bite in the car, because on those real slick racetracks, you got to do what you got to do to keep side bite in the car. 1,000 pounds is a little stiff, but that wouldn't surprise me. I think we went to a 600 where we normally run a pair of 500s, and we were running a 450 in the 500 at the beginning of the week when the racetrack was pretty decent, and then we ended up going to a 600 and a 500 to help tighten the car up getting in. But what we were trying to accomplish was right rear side bite. What do you feel spacing the right front out away from the chassis does? Well, we talked about that here earlier. What I think it does is it makes the car more stable, and it takes the steer out of the right. I mean, not steer. It takes some of the spring rate. The wheel rate is going to be softer compared to your spring, because you're moving the tire further away from the spring. So the actual wheel rate is going to be softer. So the car is going to feel like it has a softer spring in it. And I personally think if a guy gets that right front out a little further, we don't end up seeing the car diving into the dirt as much. I think it helps stabilize the car getting into the corner where it doesn't drop the frame so hard. Mason, 3,300 pound car, 225 current spring. Was
That's
Mason?
Metric street stock.
Metric street stock. Yep. Yeah. If you're running a 225 and you went to when you go to a shorter spring, you're going to have to up it 25 pounds. So I would try a 250 with a 13-inch spring. Changing the spring table in that car is going to get you a lot of extra side bite. And then that stiffer spring is going to force the car to put load on the tire and give you a lot better side bite.
Yeah, I heard there was a lot of rumblings down there at Super Nationals of, getting the spring table and slowing down the right rear cage and things to make it act more like a two-link car, but having that high spring rate.
Yeah. Well, it was tough to get. I mean, like I said, there was absolutely no grip in the racetrack, so people were struggling. It was tough to be able to get that racetrack to go for 8 days. You got to do something. And like I said, it was smooth, stayed smooth all week. I mean, it never had a ripple in the racetrack whatsoever. They did an awesome job with that. Didn't have much grip, but it was definitely smooth. IMCA hobby stock. What should the percentages be like across the rear, left side, Well, the left side in one of those cars, you're going to have to be around 52%, just because they're a high center of gravity car. Rear percentage, boy, uh, if you can get in that 55 range, that's going to be good. I mean, that's definitely going to help the car. Cross weight wise, I can't really tell you about the actual cross percentages, but once again, I still kind of like that 150 on the stock car type cars. That 150 pounds of bite in that left rear seems to be pretty conventional. I mean, that seems to do good. RJ, I wanted to say thanks to all the BHE staff, Austin, Brandon, and Bobby for all their help last week. The car was fast. Driver needs to have more courage to drive it in on the high side. LOL. Well, RJ, it was nice to see you last weekend. You had a fast race car. You're just another one of those guys that was one spot short. And that seemed to be fairly common there for a while. We had a lot of our customers that ended up being, one spot short. Just this is the way the thing goes. Jared, rear percentage for sport mod. I've been told 53 to 56. I would agree with that, Jared. I tell customers 55%. Start out like a long feature like the Super Nationals there. I'd start the race at 56% because you're going to burn a little fuel off. So you're going to be good. You're going to be around 54 at the end probably. Also, tire pressures on a sport mode. I've been told lower is the new move. 8 pounds left rear, 10 pounds left front, 14 pounds right front, 12 pounds right rear. That's less than what I would recommend. That 8 pounds is going to cause that left rear to wrinkle. And I think you're going to have a problem with the sidewall to the point where you're going to lose a little bit of surface contact with that small pressure. And maybe guys were doing some of that stuff. I mean, to get grip last weekend, that, wouldn't surprise me to have to try to go lower on air, but I don't think that's the answer. Right front, I don't know, 14 pounds is a little thin. On a racetrack that's super smooth, slick, and slow, probably 14 pounds is probably fine. Right rear, I'm afraid you're going to roll that tire over and you're going to lose that first inch of, it's going to buckle to the center of that tire. You're going to lose that first inch of tread. And it's going to create, in my opinion, it's going to create, you only got 8 inches of tire, and I don't think you're going to use the full 8 inches of tire if you have too low air pressure. Just my opinion. Bob wants to know, Chad, what is the part number extension for a 9-inch shock setup for your load stick?
I just double checked it. It's a WM251-23 is a 2-inch extension. We also have a 1-inch also.
All right. Kyle, I'm seeing Northern Sport Mod. What does pull bar length change? Also, do you think closer to the rear end housing or out front of it? With a solid upper link, I think length is somewhat important because the longer you go, the more traction you're going to have down the straightaway, but it won't be as quick a traction as if you have a shorter bar. That's going to be the same whether you're running a modified sport mod, whatever the case would be. Angle is another thing. More angle gives you more traction instantly, but doesn't last as long. And we actually run ours in the center of the housing because with it being solid, it doesn't move that much. I mean, it moves. Actually, we're actually an inch in front of the housing because when the car gets hiked up and the rear end tries to rotate, it does go back. The top does go back an inch just because of the steer factor in the car. So then that puts us at the center. So that's kind of what we've had good luck with.
To touch on that 9-inch load stick, assuming you're putting that on a stock car, so one of the things you want to do is have a solid stick in the opposite side of the load stick, so you get some good data there. So you have a setup stick for the left rear and the right rear, and then you have the load stick on the opposite side as a solid stick, so that you get some comparable numbers there when you're using the stick on the back.
Dan, Mr. Drury, appreciate everything you guys do and all the help with the Super Nationals. Well, Dan, we appreciate you and appreciate your business, and we had a good time. I know the guys were down there by your pit a few times, and hopefully we're giving you some good help and making Kelly's Super Nationals as good as it could possibly be.
Boy, they created a quite a buzz talking about building a second track, huh?
Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, that was quite the story there for a while when they were talking about building a second racetrack and building the grandstands so that you could go on one side or the other and watch. Well, no, that would have to be a hell of a feat to know which racetrack you were running on and which one you were running. That'd be. Could you imagine what it would cost to build that? I mean,
Good Lord. Yeah.
I don't know.
The broadcasting, flow on one track, IMCA TV on the other.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that would be interesting. Because it'd be hard for like watching on IMCA TV. How would you watch two racetracks at one time?
Yeah, my laps would melt with all the lineups and what track they're going to. Track A, track B.
Yeah. Well, I think somebody needed a conversation.
It was a good conversation.
It was a good conversation. There was no doubt in my mind. Josh, thanks, Bob and Chad, for all the info. You guys are very helpful. I appreciate that. We do our very best, and we enjoy helping you guys. That's kind of what we're here to do, and we have fun with it. Joseph was going to try to take some caster split out of the left side to try to tighten the car for a longer length and wider corner track, but realized I was already out of adjustment with that corner. So I took some length out of the right side bar and took 5/8 spacer out of the right rear. Was that a bad idea, or did I do that incorrect? Car drove phenomenal with that adjustment. If the car drove phenomenal with that adjustment, sounds to me like you made the right adjustments.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with less caster split on a bigger track, right?
Yep.
Short track, more caster split to make it turn in, and bigger sweeping corners would be less caster split.
Yeah, definitely would make it drive nicer on that bigger racetrack. No doubt about it. Robbie, on an IMCA stock car, what is a good left rear drop to start on a dry slick racetrack, and what preload should you try to maintain on a 16-inch spring? Well, the preload, you're going to want to start with probably about 150 pounds of preload on that 16-inch spring, but under hike, it's not going to actually have a whole lot of preload in it. Because the biggest thing you're trying to do under dynamic movement is making sure the spring never actually loses any, always has some load in it to whatsoever. So that's probably what I would say. Rear drop, it depends on where you measure your drop, but I would say 4.5 inches would be a pretty good number. 5 might be a little much for a stock car. 4.5 probably sounds reasonable. Joseph, thanks for all the help. I've learned a lot from these videos and more confident in making the changes to the car. As a result, have shown I'm much faster each week. Well, I appreciate that, Joseph. That's kind of what our goal is, to get you guys faster and make the races more competitive, and makes it better for you as the racer, makes it better for the fan, and makes it better for everybody.
So are you going to anywhere? Are you going to Marshalltown this weekend?
Yeah, they've got practice on Thursday night and they race Friday night and Saturday night. Odds are Bob probably is not going to make practice. I kind of think I had enough racing for a while. If it wasn't Marshalltown, I probably would stay home and hang out with the dog and maybe go take pictures of something or do something different for a little bit. Maybe get the boat out, see if there's any fish still in the lake, something like that. But Marshalltown show is always a good show. Yeah, I always enjoy going over there, and when the racetrack's in good shape, that place race is really nice. They do a good job. I'm very impressed with Marshalltown, and always have liked Marshalltown. The racetrack itself is pretty unique. Let's see. What is a good group number on a sport mod? Well, our group number on our sport mod is 18.5 inches. Your group number, depending on where you're measuring it, if you're measuring it from the axle housing, probably 5 inches. But in measuring our actual chain to where it's located at is 18.5 inches on a BHE car. Why is running spring behind on the left rear so uncommon on the USRA mod? I would have to believe that the reason it's uncommon is because you've got to run, well, I think it has to do with the fact of that you can't run it as a coilover. So running the spring in front kits will actually give the car more traction with the spring in front, because you're always loading into the spring and then running the shock behind to control it. But other than that, I'm not sure I can answer that question, Spencer. I don't know why the left rear is so. You don't see that. And like I said, I know if I was running like on a sport mod, I'd put the spring in front because it's going to have more traction. When the rear end does rotate, even though it doesn't rotate much because of the solid upper link, it still does rotate. So you'd always be rotating into the spring. Where with behind the housing, unless you can put a lot of preload in it, you're actually rotating away from the spring, which could cause the car to try to fall down in the middle of the corner, or it'd be harder to drive getting into the corner. Because you'd have to do a lot of trail braking, otherwise the car would fall very easily. Joseph, Chad, I will have a nice big order on parts coming in within the next week or next couple months. Won't be cheap, but much needed upgrade in my program. Awesome.
Well, I appreciate that, Joseph.
Chad's got a lot of nice parts. It's a pretty cool place. Got to spend 8 days with Chad this last week and see all of his stuff. And of course, I know most of it by hand, but still cool display and puts a lot of effort into what you guys need.
We had a company first for trackside. We had everything that everybody wanted. Usually, one guy will come up and request some off the wall thing that we never thought we'd need at the track, but we had it all covered this week. So we were high-fiving and celebrating that we didn't have that one person that came up and asked for a part that we didn't have in the truck. So I guess I finally got a big enough trailer to put it all in.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, watching you guys bring that trailer in and stick it in a 5-foot area was pretty exciting.
Yeah, Trent's truck was a little longer than ours, and
I was going to say, I looked at that and I'm like, holy moly, that's a big truck.
Yeah, we had to spin the gate off the hinges, and it was a little nerve-wracking there for the first 10 minutes, but Josh Wheeler in there, and he was signing autographs later, and
what a driver! I'll tell you what, that dude was one heck of a truck driver. I mean, I was impressed. I watched this whole deal. Nothing got scratched or nothing, and he had to maneuver it quite a bit. And this big truck looked like somebody's house. Joseph, is there a reason why some people prefer springs in front of the rear end instead of behind the rear end on a Wasota Midwest Modified? Well,
same as Spencer's question, pretty much.
Kind of the same as Spencer's question. The only thing is, of course, with the Wasota stuff, you can actually run it as a coilover. You can run the shock and spring together, and I'm
I don't think so.
Maybe you can't.
I don't think so. Not a Midwest mod.
I think it's just preference, driver preference, and car setup. The springs behind the housing. What I've actually always done, or what I would like to do, if I had the option of running the springs on a slider, I would run the left front or the left rear in front of the housing and the right rear behind the housing, because then when the car, even with that solid upper link, when the car goes through its steer fashion, you're loading that left rear spring and you're unloading that right rear spring, so you're putting a lot of grip in the race car, a lot of left rear bike in the car under the throttle. The only thing with that setup, sometimes it can be a little finicky getting in, can be a little bit tight getting into the corner. But for a guy that's really good at trail braking and not letting the car fall down and keeping the steer in the car, that works really well. That would be on a slick racetrack. That would be my optimum setup. But I think the rules state in Wasota that you've got to have this. You can't have, or maybe it's. Some of the rules you can't have them staggered. The shocks got to be either the shocks have got to be in the front and springs have got to be in the back, or vice versa. They can't be staggered. And I'm not familiar enough with that rule to be for sure. Alan, on a street stock, how much of the difference between the left and right wheel weights do you want to stay within when scaling? Well, like I said, that left rear, I would still try to get that left rear so that it's around 150 pounds heavier than the right rear. The front, I just assume get the left front so that it's just a little heavier than the right front. I don't really care so much about the front, split as much as I do the rear split. Well, we've got just a few more minutes if there's a couple other questions out there.
We're
Where are you
back on in
going
2
this
weeks.
weekend? Oh, you're going to the Jamboree. That's right.
That's in 2 weeks.
It's in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Bow hunting starts this week.
Oh, awesome.
I'll be
So
hanging in a
you're
tree.
getting a weekend off?
I'll be hanging in a tree.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be at Marshalltown Speedway. And the weather all week down here looks like it's going to be like 75 and dry. So
We might go to the stock cars Friday night at Mississippi Thunder. They got that big stock car special there, and then Deer Creek, I think, is 10,000 to win Saturday night.
oh, I did hear something about that.
I think Friday is 3 at Fountain, and then 10,000 to win Saturday night at the Creek, and USRA style stock cars. So that'll be a good weekend. But I might sneak out there Friday and then hang in a tree on Saturday.
Mm.
Be back in 2 weeks then?
Yeah, we'll be back in 2 weeks, which would be today's the 11th. So we'll be back the 25th.
Yeah, only a couple more weeks left.
Yeah, it won't be long. It's going to start slowing her down here pretty good. You know, after Super Nationals, it goes down pretty slow or pretty fast. Marshalltown races. But then there's a bunch of races in October. My racing in October, you know, I'm not a winter sport kind of guy. And, and I really wasn't a super warm kind of guy either. That first 3 days, that actually just kicked my butt there last week at Super Nationals. That 97-degree day with high humidity, man, I tell you what, we were fortunate that we were under a tent and there was a breeze. If it wouldn't have been for that breeze, that would have been really brutal. Adam wants to know if the stock car is booked up BHE class in February. No, it's not. We have some people that have already registered. We take 65 people because that's my maximum that I can actually fit in my shop. So if you're thinking about coming, I'd probably register sooner than later because the stock car one and the sport mod one are the ones that always sell out. Usually the 4-link one, it gets close, but there's usually some room in the 4-link ones. So, but the other two, they usually sell out about a month in advance. Thomas wants to know, what adjustable front spring cup do you like on a metric with a factory mount shock? I don't know. You don't have anything like that, do you?
No, I assume he's talking about the one where the shock was in the middle, like what All-Star makes one. It's got a threaded sleeve. Yep. Yeah, we never made that because All-Star has it.
Joseph, time to get some meat in the freezer. Hunting season here and already in Montana. Blue engine last week in this race car, so I'm done for the season. Thanks again, Bob and Chad, for all the help and knowledge, and bless us with every other week. It's much appreciated.
Montana sounds like fun.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, Jake ended up burning his motor down trying to get fourth in that modified A. He ended up fifth, and then nobody got DQ'd, so it cost him a motor to do that deal.
I see that. Or I heard you guys talking about it.
Came up one spot short. Michael, hey Bob, I have a sport mod. So you're saying it's better to run both rear springs in front of the rear end? If you have an IMCA sport mod, you need to run them both on top of the rear end. That's the rules. If you can run your springs on a slider, once again, if there's no rule that says where you have to run them, I run the left front or the left rear in front and the right rear behind. If you have to run them both together, I still believe in running both springs in front of the housing. Was going for the lead and said this engine is running too good to be up here in these conditions, and sure enough, it blew 5 seconds later. Well, that's kind of like McBurney's stock car engine. He's leading the stock car thing going away, and all of a sudden that thing went kerboom. I mean, the freaking smoke come out of the back of that thing like it definitely unloaded. We've seen a couple 3 engines blow last weekend.
Yeah, there was a couple big smoke shows.
Yep. Then that one in stock car Maine, when that guy lost that rear end.
That was exciting.
Ball of fire. And McBurney was right behind him. He said, I didn't know what to do. I was like, well, you sure wouldn't want to hit it. Yeah, I didn't. Well, you can kind of smell the rear end grease about a lap before that. And sure enough, and then the 19 car broke the whole front section of the rear end off. So the rear end and the drive shaft came out of his. So, yeah, it was interesting. I wouldn't have thought there would have been that much load on those cars because, like I said, the racetrack was pretty slick.
Yeah. Yeah, and 8 days like that, and they gave the count on laps and all that stuff, but you're bound to see about every scenario in racing.
Pretty much. Yep, pretty much. There were some guys who were doing some serious driving, and that some of those stock car qualifiers got pretty interesting. Nose pieces laying all over, and yeah, did you hear that? Or you maybe didn't know that hobby stock that Mike Smith, the 22 car, his engine brought $10,000.
Seriously?
Yep.
Who gets that money?
They put it in a fund, and each driver will get a percentage of that.
Huh.
And Tim's, I think, brought 6,400, and the Sport Mod, I think, was like 7,100, and I don't remember what the stock car one brought.
So do them people get a new engine then?
Oh no, that's part of winning the Super Nationals.
So you give your engine away and don't get any money for it?
Pretty much, that's how that works. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Huh.
But you win the Super Nationals.
Right. 10,000.
Yep.
And a new crate's 10,000.
Well, Tim got 10,000, so at least he covered the price of his crate.
Interesting.
Oh, stock car was 10,000. Yeah, I thought I had heard that stock car was up there pretty high too. Yeah, that was a lot of money. That was higher than I've never actually remembered any of those engines bringing. That 7,100 number seems pretty common, but let's see. Joseph thought I had a flat until I could smell burnt oil, and then I shut it down as quick as I could. Hopefully, able to salvage some parts. Highly doubt it. Yeah, usually kind of when they kind of blow, they kind of blow. All right, guys. Well, it's 8 o'clock. We appreciate all listening to all you guys and talking with all you guys again tonight. And we'll be back in 2 weeks and see what's been happening. We'll be able to talk about the. They said that the hobby stock motor had 47 nights on it and still brought $10,000.
That's crazy.
Anyway, well, thanks again, guys, and we'll see you later. Thanks, Chad.
Yep, thanks. See you later.